It's Get Out of Here. I'm Warren Levinson. It's America's greatest secular religious event. It's the biggest holiday of the television season, the largest showcase for snacks and TV commercials. Oh, and by the way, it's the championship game for American professional football. The Super Bowl draws tens of thousands of visitors, only some of whom have come to see the game. More are in the host city to soak up the atmosphere. This year's Super Bowl is in Miami. It's no stranger to the contest. The city's had 10 of them before, though none in the last decade. To survey the scene for Super Bowl LIV, that's 54 if you don't speak Roman, we talked the other day with Bill Talbert. He's CEO of the Miami Convention and Visitors Bureau. So we're talking with Bill Talbert, who is the CEO of the Greater Miami Convention and Visitors Bureau. And Mr. Talbert, give me an overview of what the visitor to Miami for the Super Bowl will encounter. Maybe we haven't been there in 5 or 10 years. What's new? What are we going to know about? What do we need to know?
Yeah. Well, it's actually been 10 years since we've had our last Super Bowl. It was 2010. And if your listeners haven't been to Miami in 5 years or even 1 year, it's a totally different place. We're one of the top luxury destinations in the world today. And it's no surprise that this Super Bowl we're having on February 2nd, 2020 is Miami's 11th. And no city has had 11. So we're getting our number one position back. And we're very excited about that. We had the second Super Bowl, and here we have the 54th Super Bowl. So that's what, 52 years apart. So it kind of seems like yesterday, but we're a big event town. One of the big things about Miami in the last few years, Miami is the easiest place in the United States to get in and out of by air. Miami International Airport is the only airport in the United States served by more than 100 airlines. Nobody has 100. We are now up to 105. So the easiest place. We also have a downtown airport, and most people don't really realize that. But when you get in a car from the airport, the first stoplight you hit is when you're in downtown Miami. And the first stoplight you hit when you're in Miami Beach is when you're there. So a downtown airport with more air service from around the world. So it's easy to get to, easy to get around. We have a new recently opened high-speed rail called Brightline or the Virgin. So that's a high-speed rail right now connecting downtown Miami, downtown Fort Lauderdale, and downtown Palm Beach. And a year and a half from now, we'll connect up to Orlando. So we're excited. But one of the things that has really evolved is our downtown Miami has really made a great resurgence. We have direct rail service from the airport to downtown Miami, and it's now a walking city, and it's obviously on the water on Biscayne Bay. So if your listeners are coming for the Super Bowl, one of the biggest difference in 10 years ago, this time your listeners will see what's called Super Bowl Live. Super Bowl Live. Of course, it's also Super Bowl LIV 54, and we planned it that way. But Super Bowl Live is Bayfront Park in downtown Miami, which is on Biscayne Bay, will be open for the entire week before the Super Bowl, and it's free to the public.
And what's going on there?
It's games, it's free concerts, it's food and beverage, and it's totally redeveloped as Super Bowl Miami. So it's exciting, it's new, and it's open. The concept here, Warren, is, years ago for the Super Bowl, nobody got a ticket. You couldn't really go to the events. So it was kind of insulated from the general public. So the NFL and the communities, we've been at this a long time, came up with this concept of some downtown package free. And in this case, the local host committee pays for this, but it's a requirement of the bid to have a Super Bowl Live. So once again, we're excited about this. It's brand new. It'll be open all week. And also, this is the first Super Bowl Live on the water. Uh-huh. So we're always, you always want to distinguish yourself from the competition. we're putting temporary docks out there. We checked with the schedule. It'll be half moon over Miami, and so it'll be absolutely stunning. And this downtown Super Bowl Live overlooks Port Miami, which is the cruise capital of the world. This downtown package is stunning, absolutely stunning.
Should you come that week if you're not interested in football?
This is not about a football game. This is about, business travel, incentive travel, and remember the football game is a few hours on Sunday. But the whole ramp up at the Miami Beach Convention Center, across the bay, will be the media center, but also what's called the NFL Experience. That is a ticketed item, highly interactive. So if someone is not here for football, and by the way, many of your listeners know about the parties here, Lady Gaga, you name them. They're building right off downtown, next to the port, a $5 million place for Lady Gaga to perform Saturday night before the Super Bowl. They build it and then they'll take it down. One performance, 5,000 people.
Wow.
But the party scene, just about every star in the world is going to have some kind of party, and there's probably 100,000 people plus who come to Miami with no ticket, with no prospect of a ticket, just to be involved in the buzz. Remember, it's warm here and it's cold everywhere else, and it's easy to get to.
So this is an event that Miami sees as a way of putting itself forward? Or is this something, you've had 10 of them before. Does Miami overall look at this and say, oh, another one of those? Show us something.
No, I tell you, no, Warren, we do hear that, but we are a big event town. And so these big event towns kind of define us. We have the South Beach Wine and Food. We have Art Basel. We're going to have the College Football Championship next year, and then we're going to have World Cup. We're a big event town. So these big events, remember, it's warm here and it's cold there. So the priceless media we coverage that we get that week, it's a great investment. It's good for the community. And we do talk to our partners and our community. We need to treat this like our first Super Bowl, not like our 11th.
And the famous Miami locations like South Beach and Calle Ocho, are they participating in this? Are they hiding out from it?
Absolutely. No. The buzz is already starting. On South Beach, Fox and ESPN and others, they're building the studios. They will broadcast from Ocean Drive on South Beach, on 8th Street and Ocean. And so when you see Fox and ESPN from a booth, the backdrop is the Atlantic Ocean on South Beach, as they have done in the past. So, no, all of our communities, this is a big, important event. So everybody's embracing it. This is business. This is customers. We have high-speed rail. We have trolleys. So there's a lot of alternatives for transportation. The scooters, a lot of alternatives on how to get around. But no, the community can't wait. We already have welcome signs at our airport.
Wow.
Big welcome signs.
If you're listening to this podcast, you already know who's in the Super Bowl. You and I, Bill Talbert, we do not, because we only know that there are 4 teams that are angling to get in. So are you planning anything specific to fans from those? Well, it will be down to 2 cities by the time people hear this.
No. We have the team hotels. We focus our efforts on the team hotels. The 2 team hotels are the JW Marriott in downtown Miami and the JW Marriott in our northeast quarter in the Aventura area. So we focus some efforts there because a lot of the fans will, hover around those team hotels. The headquarter hotel is at the Intercon downtown on the bay. So that's how we, those fans from those communities, they'll find us, we'll find them. And, that's a hot ticket. If you go on Ticketmasters right now, dial-up Ticketmasters. It's like $6,000 for a ticket.
Right. It's entirely crazy.
Now,
Last thing.
I know. Hang on, Warren.
Okay.
We have a little sign that has all of our tickets from all 10 of our games. So it's a nice, it's a beautiful original tickets. You know how much the ticket was for Super Bowl II here in Miami?
Probably just the change you could find in the cushions of the sofa.
$12.
Yeah. It is kind of amazing.
And now it's $5,000 or $6,000. And the suites, $250,000. You know, and a lot of this is incentive travel. You know, the top producer, the top seller of Caterpillar.
Right, companies will reward their.
We call it incentive travel.
Yeah,
and that's the kind of trip that that's rewarding your top salespeople. But I think the big thing now, almost every star is having some kind of private party, and it's if you're a star, and we have houses on the bay, and once again, it's unbelievable to build a $5 million kind of a place for Lady Gaga to perform once.
That is kind
and
of
it's on the bay, and that's that's pretty cool. Now that's because of the Super Bowl, and it's a Saturday night before. I forget how much the tickets are. 500,000. Lady Gaga.
Wow.
Can you get me tickets, Warren?
I probably can't, but I might know somebody who knows somebody, but I doubt it. So last thing, I don't want to harsh your mellow or anything, but Miami is known as a city on the forefront of effects of climate change. Is there something that will be showcased in those 2 weeks that people coming will see what Miami's doing about it?
We have a whole sustainability program. The principal program, we have a formal program, Ocean to the Everglades, O to E. So we have a whole program of really the ocean, the community, and the Everglades along the sustainability lines. I think you can go online and look up O to E, and that's a brand new thing here. That's never happened before. Related, we've been out to the Everglades, but it links the ocean to the Everglades with our community in between. So the community's doing a lot on sustainability, making investments. Bond issues have been passed here by the public to pay for those capital improvements. So I give credit for the community. They're doing stuff and they're investing. They're doing the right thing. You can say, did it happen soon enough? Who knows? But I'm about looking forward. So all of the county, the city of Miami, the city of Miami Beach are making major investments in, I call, sustainability.
Bill Talbert, thank you very much. I really appreciate you taking the time to talk about this.
Warren, thank you. Appreciate your efforts. Go Miami.
Bill Talbert is CEO of the Greater Miami Convention and Visitors Bureau. After the break, a football-flavored My Favorite Trip. It's Get Out of Here, the AP Travel Podcast. I'm Warren Levinson. And now, My Favorite Trip and AP Podcast cross-promotion time. Ralph Russo is the Associated Press chief college football writer. He's also the host of the AP Top 25 College Football Podcast, which you can stream or download on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, or your app of choice, wherever you get this show. Personally, I like Overcast. We had him tell a Super Bowl story, and as you'll hear, a whole lot more. You have covered a Super Bowl. I know you're the college football writer, but at the AP, we have a tendency to, for the big events, throw everything we got at it. So you have been to a Super Bowl. You have anything interesting to tell us about what that experience was?
I did. I covered actually one of the more interesting Super Bowls from a sports standpoint, but also from sort of a pop culture standpoint. I covered the Super Bowl in New Orleans that followed 9/11. So the 2001 football season, but the Super Bowl that was played in 2002. I was living in Jackson and working in Jackson, Mississippi at the time, and it was sort of a bone being thrown to me. Hey, you only have a drive down to New Orleans, about 2 hours and change. Why don't you come and we'll give you a little experience of a Super Bowl? So that was a lot of fun, and obviously the halftime show with U2 was as exciting as the game, which sort of launched the Patriots dynasty. My most memorable part of that, now remember, I lived in Jackson, Mississippi, so I used to go to New Orleans quite frequently. It's where I sort of grew my love for that city. Jackson is a nice place to live, but New Orleans is wonderful. And New Orleans, as a New Yorker, as a native New Yorker, always sort of reminded me of New York in some ways. It's a place where you can sort of lead a weird existence and still have a very happy life.
Right. Yes. Exactly.
Not to mention all the food and all the music and things along those lines.
People have fun here and think that they should. It's a line from a Randy Newman song about New Orleans, and I think that's really right.
And as someone who just was in New Orleans for the latest national championship football game, I was reminded of all that stuff. Though at 49, I probably don't have quite as much fun in New Orleans as I did in that particular year when I was 31. The most notable part about that trip to New Orleans was a late night meal, because that's what you do in New Orleans.
Right.
Inevitably, it's 2 or 3 in the morning, and you're looking for something to eat. And there's a diner, and I'm having a hard time remembering the name. I feel like Wildflower might be the name of the diner, way down on the end of Bourbon Street, where you just eat, trashy breakfasts and, cold pancakes and not very well done eggs and things along those lines. But nonetheless, is also super popular because of its location. And the highlight of that quick meal was simply seeing Sheryl Crow in the corner. She had played at the Super Bowl concert that night in the arena down there. And she and I guess some of her friends decided to grab that same trashy late night meal, and my friend talking me out of trying to go talk to Sheryl Crow. That was the biggest thing, because it's late, so I was in whatever state I was in, and I was really a big fan of Sheryl Crow, and I was trying to build up the courage to literally go try to talk to Sheryl Crow, and my friend talked me out of that. So that was the most notable thing to me from that Super Bowl, other than the game itself.
Okay, note to Sheryl Crow, if you ever stop by the AP in New York, which happens, people like that sometimes, stop by and say hey to Ralph. Work up the courage to it. He's really approachable. I remember covering the 2002 Winter Olympics in Salt Lake, and the thing about that, again, first Olympics after 9/11, my job with the Olympics team was essentially I was the worst-case scenario reporter. So if something really bad happened at the Olympics, it was my job instead of all the guys who were used to covering track and field and skiing and snowboarding and stuff.
I have an interesting worst-case scenario reporter story from you, which involves some travel.
Oh, yeah?
When I first moved to Mississippi, that brought me back to the AP as a sports writer, but a person who also did a lot of news in Mississippi. It was late in 1999. December of 1999, I made that move. So we were preparing as news organization and really, the country for what becomes of Y2K.
Right.
So I was new to Mississippi, and the assignment was, we want you to be in the casinos in Biloxi, which is an interesting, again,
right.
As someone who was not very well traveled, had never been to Mississippi, I didn't even know there was a burgeoning, thriving,
huge
casino industry on the
exactly.
Gulf Coast. So the idea being that, if all hell breaks loose for Y2K,
it will happen at the casinos.
Certainly, the place will go dark and slot machines will start shooting money out, and it could be pandemonium and chaos. So my assignment was to sort of cover the possible pandemonium and chaos. And essentially what I just did is I hung out in the casinos and gambled and, had a couple of drinks, because nothing happened down there.
Right, exactly.
But I was nervous enough to keep my professionalism, because it was a relatively new job, and it was a relatively new job. So I was worried about messing up the assignment. So I remember for most of the night being, again, very reporter Ralph, and going to talk to people and trying to find people I could talk to tell me, hey, what could possibly go wrong, and come up with a plan of attack, so to speak, of where should I be? What would be the best casino? So mostly, though, I end up once Y2K came and went, the turn of the year came and went, and I realized, no pandemonium is going to happen, I ended up just, again, enjoying myself at the casinos down there, and probably lost a little money on gambling, and that was it. But that was one of the more interesting assignments I had, and I really got to learn to love and enjoy that Gulf Coast area down there for a couple of days. Other than the casinos, there's some wonderful things down there, as far as a town like Long Beach, I believe it is, where there's a great art scene.
Right. Yeah, no, there's a lot of great stuff, and to this day, not as well known to the rest of the country.
Absolutely.
Down there, it's really. I've been there basically on presidential campaign trips, and more seasoned reporters than I always knew where we needed to go to dinner, and that was, among my greatest reporting memories. The thing about being a worst case scenario in the 2002 Olympics, I had done this. I did this for 11 Olympics. My job was mainly to cover the cultural side of the Olympics, the sort of where the host country, where the culture of the host country intersects with the culture that is the Olympics, which is a separate, completely world. And so I did a little sports coverage, but mostly that. And then, of course, I was there in case something. Well, the thing about the first Olympics after 9/11 was everybody had one of those reporters. And those reporters had no idea what to do. They hadn't been to the Olympics before. And if you'll remember, the main thing that came out of the 2002 Olympics was the gigantic controversy over the judging in the pairs figure skating, where the Russians was either the Russians or the French got hosed. Now I don't remember. And Ottavio Cinquanta, the head of the International Skating Union, had a daily press conference that was covered live on TV. I know this because friends were calling me to say, I saw you at this news conference. And to this day, I will always believe that the reason that became such a giant story worldwide was because the Olympics press corps was swelled by the number of worst-case scenario reporters who didn't know what to do, exactly what to cover, but they saw controversy and they said, that's a news story. I know how to cover that. And that's how that became big, because the rest of us looked at it and said, yeah, it doesn't seem exactly right, but it's pairs figure skating. Who the hell cares about pairs figure skating? Anyway, this segment is called My Favorite Trip, and I know you've got a favorite trip you want to tell us about.
I do, and it's a pretty easy. My wife and I do extensive traveling within the States. I haven't done a lot of overseas traveling, but she's outdoorsy, and she has brought that out of me. So we go to national parks all the time and things along those lines. But the one grand trip that my wife, and she set the stage when we were dating, and I probably should give you a little bit of the backstory on it, because it was one of those things where sometimes you have to be careful what you commit to. So early on when we were dating, and again, I was still living in Mississippi, I met her down there. She is a world traveler. She has lived in Africa. She has lived in India for short periods of time. She has lived all over the United States and traveled all over. And she always had, within just a few months of us dating, she made it known how much she loved Africa. She had spent time in Uganda, and that her dream was to go back, but to go to Tanzania and hike Mount Kilimanjaro. And early on in our dating relationship, she brought this up, and she said, so would you like to go with me? And, again, at that point in the relationship, you're probably thinking like, sure.
I'm going to say yes, even if I don't mean
I
yes.
really like this woman, so I'm certainly going to say yes now. Not realizing that really that early I was committing to that trip, because ultimately we went on to get married, and that became our honeymoon. Uh-huh. We went to Tanzania for our honeymoon. We hiked up Mount Kilimanjaro. We went on a safari after Kilimanjaro, and we went to Zanzibar for a couple of days of relaxation on the beach and working backwards, because that was the end of the trip. We had done so much exploring and exciting and thrilling things that being on the beach could not have been more boring. Huh. Like we did not enjoy our time on the beach. We felt like, what do we do next? Like, we're just going to sit here and get drinks? Like, that seems like we've done.
That seems somehow wrong.
Yeah, we need to go on to our next adventure. But that was by far, especially for me who hadn't done a ton of traveling, the hike up Mount Kilimanjaro. For anybody who's not familiar, it is a touristy thing. I mean, it doesn't draw quite as many people, I think, as Everest these days, but it has a little bit of that feel to it insofar as it is geared to help you get to the top. Uh-huh. You go with guides, you go with porters who carry your stuff. It is not a technical hike, but it's tiring. I mean, I wouldn't say like you can just roll out of bed and do it. But if you're in decent shape, you should be able to do it. We didn't do extensive training for it. And most people get to the top, though not everybody, because it is, I think it's 19,000 feet. So you will get some
some thin air. It'll be
some legitimate altitude sickness, and sometimes that will come on with people who are just not pacing themselves or maybe haven't hydrated properly. You can be a world-class athlete and still find yourself with altitude sickness and need to rush down.
Everybody needs oxygen, whether you're a world-class athlete or not.
No doubt. And we went when my wife planned the trip, because she plans all of our trips. I am just a passenger on most of these trips.
Right.
When she planned the trip, it was about a month or so after our wedding. We were just sort of at sort of a tail. I think it was the tail end of the rainy season. In Tanzania, but also more particularly on Kilimanjaro. And it made it a little cheaper. Mm-hmm. So we decided, well, it's the tail end. I mean, we could be fine. It's the tail end of the rainy season. So we flew in, and just to get to Kilimanjaro is, trains, planes, and automobiles.
Right.
Actually, it's just descendingly smaller planes. It's one large plane and then another smaller plane and then another smaller plane, to the point where you think that I don't think the planes can get any smaller, so we must be here. And we went on. We do the hike, and it takes about 3 or 4 days to get up. And unfortunately, we hit the rainy season. The rainy season wasn't quite done. And you don't really appreciate how devastating rain can be until you're living outside for a few days. We have done camping trips and things like that, but nothing to the extent where you say, okay, I'm going to be outside for 4 days. And if my stuff gets wet, it might not get dry again.
Right, you're going to be wet for 4 days, and you're going to feel wet for days afterward.
It was an interesting exploration, and literally and figuratively, because as we're going up, there are so many points where it's just like, this is beautiful, this is wonderful. And again, it is very much geared towards getting you to the top. That is the central piece of the economy in that country is
right.
Tourists. Be it for the safaris or for the mountain, and they want you to go back and tell your friends, oh, you have to do this. So they cook meals for you, and they carry your bags, and they carry your tents, and the porters set up your tents when you get to whatever base camp. But nonetheless, the rain makes it a bit of a struggle, because you have to stay inside, and you have to time your trips or your hike so that you're kind of out of the rain, even though you're in some rain gear. So, we are a newly married couple and blissfully in love. But there are points along the lines on this trip where you go, I can't believe you made me do this. And this is going in my head, like, I can't believe she decided this was going to be our honeymoon. And I'm stuck in this tent, and I'm trying to, use the 2 hours of sunlight to dry my underwear. And like, what have we done here? Though I will say this. So we made it to the top. The final ascent begins at about midnight. Uh-huh. The idea being that you, at that point, there is snow on the mountain, and you want to get up to the top before the sun starts working on that snow and it becomes too slippery
right.
for you to ascend. And it's very dark, and you have a headlight on, and you're following the guides at that point. But you really can't see anything more than a couple of feet in front of you. And what I tell people is the reason why, I know the sun thing, but the reason why they want you to ascend when you can't see it, because if you could see what you're climbing up, you would never do it.
Really?
It is unbelievably steep. You're taking, your steps are a foot or
right,
so.
Really
You're just
short.
taking tiny, tiny little steps. And when you get, and we did get to the top, and we got to the top right around sunrise, which is also another reason why they want you.
Kind of a great time to be there.
Yeah, they want you to be able to experience the sunset as you're going up. And it is one of those things where when you get to the top and you take your picture with the sign that says 19,000 feet, no matter what happened before, no matter how wet you were and how maybe your stomach was bothering you, because the altitude does some strange things to your body, even if you survive it and you're healthy enough to get up, the altitude will do some strange things to your body.
Right.
But when you get to the top and you take those pictures, and you sort of look around you, everything becomes worthwhile. Like all the bad memories just completely go away. I guess, I've heard from, women who go through childbirth, right? Once you get the child in your arms,
right,
everything,
all the pain,
all the difficulty
all the
that got to that point,
right?
This is the closest I think a man can come to that. Is at that point, all the discomfort went away. And we looked around and saw this unbelievable view, and with the woman I love, who I'm recently married to, it was a euphorically exciting moment. And then you quite literally can slide down the hill, and when I say that, like at certain points you're hiking back down, but you just sort of go like, wait a second. This snow is kind of slippery, and you just make yourself into sort of a human torpedo and just like slide down.
Gravity can be your friend. It's much better as a friend than an enemy sometimes.
Yes, so that was by far the most spectacular part of the trip. But the safaris were wonderful as well. Again, you within a couple of minutes you see an elephant right behind your truck. And you think, my God, that's the most amazing thing I've ever seen in my life. And then within a day or so, you realize, oh, no, there are elephants everywhere. Like, I've almost gotten tired of seeing yet another zebra, right? But fantastic. Trip of a lifetime type of trip. And by far the greatest thing I've done.
Wow. That is totally great. Ralph Russo is the AP college football writer. He is the host of the AP Top 25 College Football Podcast. Although the college football season has ended, the podcast season does not end. Ralph's still got plenty to talk about college football. If you have the remotest interest in the game, you need to be listening to that show. Ralph, thanks a lot.
Thank you.
And that's the show. Get Outta Here is a production of the Associated Press in partnership with Westwood One, produced under the supervision of Nikessa Moody and Peter Costanzo. I'm Warren Levinson. We'll see you next time.